Alors, bonsoir tout le monde, bienvenue à...
So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the 20th of April, the Standing Committee on Strategies and Public Policies. So, as usual, this is the third Monday of the month when we welcome different people from different community associations as well as from staff from Municipal Hall to discuss strategies and public policies relevant to the community. So, without further ado, I would invite Madame Marianne Tardy, who is the director of the Centre d'accueil francophone des immigrants francophones du New-Brunswick, to present to us her. So, welcome to Municipal Hall.
Ah, génial.
Et puis de vous assurer de bien parler dans le micro.
And we're asking you to make sure that you speak into the mic so that So I was just saying thank you for letting me make a presentation on the Francophone Center for Welcoming and Support. We're in Moncton, but we cover the whole southwest region of New Brunswick. So without further ado, the team, we are 9 members of staff. We have Sophie Caillet is with us. She'll be coming soon. So you see Sadiq Oud Kassi is with new arrivals. We have economic integration that to be able to retain new arrivals. A school family, Isabelle Lavoie, families and children for school integration. Sociocultural integration, Stéphanie Tardif. We celebrated actually the integration at the Art Center here, and we thank you for your participation. It was a very successful evening. And then communication. So for welcoming and settling in, it's maybe to get new immigrants at the airport. There are permanent residents, there are interim workers, international students, a different type of thing of students. And basically we try to welcome as many new arrivals as possible, so when they arrive, our agent has a settlement plan for transportation, for housing, for social insurance number, doctors, all the type of information that they need when they arrive. And he will be basically having follow-ups with them and be basically directing them to the proper person for the different financial help, because sometimes it's very difficult for new arrivals to understand that how things work with the banks and with the cards. So we have workshops twice a year, information sessions, 5 to 7, to explain a little bit how the finances work in our country, the driver's license, and then also cellular phones. In some countries, there's no charges for phones. So here, it's all little details that are very different from where they come from. So we have to get them informed as soon as possible. Then we have networking and employability with Danielle Veno, and she tries to make sure that adaptation is as quick as possible. It's very important because without any financial resources, jobs, the trend or the tendency is for families to leave and to go to provinces where they could find jobs. So she does a great work of awareness for people in the area. So, and I thank the city of Dieppe Dieppe, which participated in the arrival of Lionel Laroche. It was basically a conference on the advantages of integrating new arrivals in businesses to create an inclusive work environment. It was very successful. There were about 60 people. Unfortunately, businesses didn't really respond, whereas it was geared basically for them to help new arrivals. There are cultural differences that have to be basically communicated. I mean, the person is from South America. There's a very strong hierarchy. In other words, they will never be able to suggest or recommend or even look at the boss in the eyes. Whereas here, it's understood that it should be. So the work that Danielle does basically is important because she prepares the employers in welcoming the arrivals. We have language courses also, and basically help them learn English because most of them are francophone. It helps them basically looking for jobs, preparation of interviews, workshops. She does a lot of networking also. It's a very important part, the networking. And basically, that's how she gives them support. Café received the award of the 3rd of July of 1808, an award from Quebec, and we're very proud for having received this. Which means basically that café is seen a little bit everywhere in Canada, and we're invited to Quebec and to Vancouver for presentations also because we're in a bilingual environment and with a francophone minority, and they're interested in finding out how we welcome our new arrivals and how we do things. School and family. Very important. It's a liaison that so the parents can register their children in francophone schools so that they can become very francophone, very quickly francophone. Make sure that they don't lose their French, so that they also maintain their levels of knowledge of the French language. It's very important, and it basically creates links between different families. There are families where one parent is a francophone, the other parent is anglophone, and what we're looking for is the children to become francophones. She does work also with children of all ages, from 0 to 10, little pencils, 0 to 5, one parent, one child, every Tuesday morning. Half are Canadians, half are immigrants, to try to have an integration going on. Basically initiation to the French language through play. It's very nice, and it also helps break down the isolation of new arrivals. Sometimes they need to have this type of relationship on a weekly basis. There's the Club Café that's every 2 weeks for 5 to 11 years old. And sometimes we invite all the families and have a big a meeting with many people, and then the youth from 12 to 18. You've seen them doing different activities, so it's a community engagement. When we see these young 16-year-olds who are basically engaging for La Maison Nazareth, for healthy relations, even if they haven't been here for more than 6 months. It's already from the get-go, we're already starting them on the path to community life. So Isabelle does a lot of different things. Information sessions with the schools. Unfortunately, this year we haven't been able to do them. There were too many storm days and too many holidays. So we had to basically put it on hold till next year, but she does invite immigrant families to tell her story to teachers, to basically express how difficult it could be for parents and for children to basically get integrated. There are different things that are totally different from what they lived before. So that's why she sets up workshops. There are different special things that happen. They call for different things that they don't understand. They don't understand, for example, crazy hair days or pajama days at school. So they phone and they ask this. And this is actually why we have these workshops. We have videos that were prepared to basically show everywhere in the province, in the partnership with other areas in Saint Jean, in Minston, etc. And then for extracurricular activities registration. And right now we're working for francophone camps because we want our francophone children to maintain their levels in French, and we want those who are basically in French language, we want them to be able to thrive. So we approached the YMCA, and they're going to have a boys and girls club. The Y is going to have a first francophone club or camp, and then so it's something that is nice to be able to offer to the new arrivals, and it's not easy because a person who comes. An immigrant with 2 or 3 children, they don't have any other family support to give him a hand. So the children have to be taken care of. They have to get a feeling of belonging. They should be encouraged to speak French. And basically that was for Isabelle, and now we go to Stephanie, who takes care of the socio-cultural integration. She has a lot of activities for all different groups to break down the isolation, to create relationships, to raise consciousness of the welcoming activity. So there are sports activities Monday nights. There are as many Canadians as immigrants, and through sports, not only is there healthy activity, but it creates relationships. They come, once or twice, and then they're hooked, and they keep going. And then lunchtime, we talk about a country once a month. It's at noontime. Sometimes it'll be in front of the municipal hall. Sometimes it'll be in the school or for municipal staff. And each time it's one immigrant who presents basically information on that person's country, and with a meal. So we learn about the culture of that person's through that person's eyes. So we've had Greece, we've had Iran, Italy, we've had Belgium, France, Japan, Bolivia. We've had quite a few. So you should come. It's usually at the Moncton Library, and it's the first Wednesday of the month, and we're very open to going to different venues, and there are more and more people who come have their lunch with us. She also has some cooking workshops. Canadians really enjoy that, and so it's one way of sensitizing the community. So through good food, we can talk about cultural differences and how or why immigrants choose to settle in the area here. There's also a Christmas party once again to break down isolation, to make sure the relationships get going on the right step. We also have activities concerning the Canadian heritage. People should learn and understand what's going on, why there are 2 languages here, why in Canada, the national holiday, the flag, where did it come from, the flag. Last year we went to Grand Pré to visit, and then we visited the Pier 21 in Halifax, that type of activity. Went to the Dune of Boctouche. Soon we're going to go to the Pays de la Sagouine. We've been there before, but by popular demand, it's very important to get this feeling of belonging, recognition of our volunteers. CAFI couldn't do anything if we didn't have volunteers. We have immigrants, we have Canadians, we have new Canadians. So it's something that's very nice, and it gives a human touch to everything that we do. So once again, I take the opportunity to thank all our volunteers, approximately 150 on a yearly basis, and Every week, basically, we have some volunteers that go to help children with their homework for any type of support, for any type of reason. We have new volunteers for conversational English. We're going to have starting conversational French. So thank you for the work that you do. We try to get as much training as possible. So now we've had workshops on mental health, on different types of therapies, integration at the workplace. We do the utmost to be able to be ready to receive the new immigrants. Healthy relations. You participated in this project. We thank you very much. It's a project that lasted 2 years, ended on the 31st of March. We're working on the reports and the videos and the debriefing. What we realized was that there was a great need on the Canadian side, as well as the new arrivals. Obviously, the new people coming in have to understand how things work around here. The woman is not necessarily stuck at home taking care of the children and preparing food. She has other things that she can do here. For example, we had set up a marmiton cooks workshop for men, and it worked well. And as a matter of fact, the women were very happy about that. There was artwork for men so that they can think about healthy relations with women. Youth have done that too. There'll be a book that'll be published and launched in May. It was interesting to see all these adolescents who were ready to share all these things. They were witnessed of reports of people talking about the violence that they had suffered. So they really wanted to do something in school. They wrote a book with illustrations, and they worked really hard with the school district and the Beau Séjour Resource Center to basically sensitize young men and older men as to the violence against women. And we realized that on the Canadian side, there was still too much violence against women. For example, in a survey, in a Francophone survey, we say that it was normal to slap one's wife after a quarrel. So we see that there's a lot of work to do with the new arrivals, but also with certain Canadians. So we're trying to get some funds to be able to continue this type of work. It's a 2-year project, but we realized that there was a whole lot more work to do. So we're able also to help women who were going through bad times with their husbands. So we were able to help them because some of them don't dare to say anything because they figure they're going to get quarreled if they said something. So we try to direct them towards the appropriate centers and to support them as much as possible without ever taking position. So that was for healthy relations, and that was with a lady who is going to unfortunately be leaving us at the end of this month. It had been begun by another woman who has left us also, because I think she went to live in the northwest region of New-Brunswick. So there, once again, this is how you see that new arrivals leave sometime to go elsewhere in the province or in the country. Communication and community development. It's very important to be able to communicate with the whole population. So we have an internet site that's going to be revisited. That's very useful in the region, in the province, in Canada, and internationally. There's a information magazine monthly that comes out at the beginning of the month. It's very useful because we list all the activities that we do, but it also there's a list of what the community does in the region, all the different funding that's available. Tell them about the success stories, the business people who's come to settle here and who have succeeded, and to talk about organizations, partners. Talk about our volunteers. We have a monthly Volunteer of the Month. We also have the one-on-one type of information for emails, where we send emails with the information. So, for example, for the outing to Pier 21, I think in 2 days we had received 21 or 60 registrations, and we have over 2,000 members in the general area, southeast. We try to continue doing what we've been doing, but once again, without the volunteers and what organizations like you who help us a lot, we wouldn't be able to do anything. This here is the cover of the magazine. It's at the library. We have a file of the month. Obviously, we talked a lot about winter these last couple of months, how to stay in shape, how to stay in shape mentally, how to we organize outdoor activities. We went to the maple sugar bush. It's a very different way for a lot of new arrivals. The weather, the cold, not being able to open windows, things like that. And this is our slogan: leave us the pleasure to welcome you in the region. So now, obviously, we want to maybe eventually do something with the city of Dieppe, have common services, to be able to collaborate with our new arrivals who live in your city, but also with Canadians. So thank you, Madame Tardy. Questions from members of council? Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madame, for having come here. I thank you. Were you able to figure out what your retention rate of new arrivals here who settle in the region? Do you keep an eye on that type of statistic to figure out how many stay after 3 years, 5 years? It's very difficult to evaluate the retention rate because in the municipalities, these figures are not registered. So the only thing we can figure out is through taxes. So there would be 63%. That was Michael Hand from the university who says that. But once again, another person who's leaving here, going to Ontario. So we have to do a lot of retention with Canadians as well as new immigrants, especially with the youth. So we're aware of this. I always say the statistics are very sensitive. They're sensitive things that give different answers to different questions, to the same question. So I always watch out for them. For the people like living here, they feel that there's a certain quality of life that they can't find elsewhere, but the economic aspects with business people as well as people looking for jobs is the difficult part of the equation. Councillor Godet, thank you, Madame Stéphanie, for your presentation. I had the opportunity to be there at the lunchtime first Wednesday of the month with the different countries. It's always very interesting, and other workshops also that are sometimes presented. We think often that le café is how would I say this is the reflection of magma, but it's not. You have a specific role with francophones, particularly, and basically new immigrants from francophone countries. And in the workshops, basically, that's what it is. And it's surprising to see sometimes how Canadians sometimes don't understand how new immigrants don't understand the way things are done here. It's a question of adaptation. Sometimes it's just a question of pointing it out because the new immigrants don't know how we do things. And that's a problem. It could be as simple as going to a bank. I mean, we consider that easy. It's easy to use the bus, but at the same time, it's not easy for those people who are coming in. So thank you very much for having done what you did, and obviously it's an added challenge to retain these new immigrants. But also with these Francophone school districts, they were not very enthusiastic before. It's still a fair challenge now. And I also noticed that new immigrants who should be sending their children to the Francophone system are still not doing it. And I believe that it's unfortunate for our Francophone rates in the province. So thank you for all your work. I recognize that many of your employees don't stay here long. Your turnover, your staff turnover is fairly important. So I wish you a lot of will. Thank you.
Le conseiller Thibodeau.
Councillor Thibodeau, thank you, Your Worship. I also want to thank you for your presentation and thank you as well for your presence in our area because the services you give are important for Francophones. Contrary as to what Councillor Gaudette says about the Francophone district was a bit slow, I think it did not receive any help from MAGMA because Francophones and Anglophone children went to English schools. So I think your arrival here in this area has very much helped Francophones. And I'm impressed by all the services you've developed over the years. In the beginning, you didn't have that many. But those services you offer are useful. And I believe all regions should have friends like you to help immigrants to integrate. We still have many more projects. And but the school district and MAGMA, for instance, the school district has been creating better relations in the Francophone area. And as far as MAGMA goes, there's an opening there for collaboration, and that changes everything. So now we will be able to collaborate with them, and it will make a difference. I see it already during the past few months. It's improved, and they have a will to keep our Francophones and to help Francophiles as well. If you have activities, events that you want to present in Dieppe, please don't be shy. You can ask us. I won't be shy. I'll come back next Monday. Thank you very much. Councillor Dallaire, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I see that we're really lucky to have Kathy here to help the Francophone and Francophile newcomers. I was speaking to somebody during the weekend that said that the youth in the province don't always have services and that there's a campaign campaign now that is trying to help municipalities where there's no service like that. And I would be interested in knowing more on that subject. And I would like to see how the city of Dieppe could help more. I think you have received my cards, my calling cards, and you can send me an email. And thank you for your help last week at the council meeting on the immigrant vote. And like I was saying on Facebook, I would like that Dieppe would be a leader in Canada in this area. It's wonderful. And it would help to keep immigrants here because we would have an inclusive community. Thank you. There are no other comments. So once again, Mrs. Tardy, Marianne, thank you for the work that you're doing. We met at the conference with Mr. Daniel Laroche. It was a great presentation, and like you mentioned, it's regretful that organizations, employers, organizations were there. Perhaps I could suggest that you bring them, you make a short presentation of Mr. Laroche's presentation, especially the parts where he talks about the cultural differences between newcomers and North Americans. And as he said, the difference between Canada and the United States exists as well. Cultural differences in the work environment as well, because I was there for 3 years in the United States. And when he spoke during his conference, it hit home. So we must continue to work with employers because integration within the community starts with a job. And that applies not only to newcomers, but also to our youth who also leave the province. Thank you for this point of education. Thank you for your work, and we'll get in touch with you to present all our other projects as well. Thank you. Next item on the agenda Annie Duguay and Pauline Cormier will discuss the new policy A37, sponsoring requests, and L20 donation requests. Good evening, both of you. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. We're here tonight to present two proposals for policies, one on donations and partnerships, nonprofit sector. So the objectives of these new policies relate to all the submissions of the sponsorships that we receive and the financing, which are already framed by policies, but for the donations, it isn't yet. So we would propose that so that all requests that we receive would be treated fairly and all in the same way. Why these new policies? It's in order that we have precise criteria to facilitate decision making and to ensure that one request would not go to more than one division, and also that contributions that are made for services or promotional items or rental of a hall be taken into consideration. the policy on donations would be supported by nonprofit organizations and would contribute to the advancement and the growth of the quality of life of residents in Dieppe. We have requests that don't fit into the policies that exist already. On sponsorships, we want to offer to organizations, nonprofit organizations, possibility of receiving a financial contribution in exchange for more presence in the promotion of events. We want to take steps for these requests for financing. We would like forms on the website, and that they would answer all criteria for this attribution. So if you have any questions on sponsorships, I could answer them. And then Pauline will come and talk about donations. Thank you, Mrs. Duguay. Are there any questions? Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. You talk about sponsorships. Are you talking about events that would take place here in Dieppe? What we propose in the criteria are 51% of activities would be held in Dieppe or an organization that would offer services in Dieppe. Or an organization that has a head office in Moncton who would offer services and events in Dieppe as well. As a sponsorship, they would want financial support to give to the municipality the possibility of giving a presence. A sponsorship that would go outside the area would be representing youth or somebody within the city of Dieppe. Would that be in this policy? If it's a group that goes to an event, then we have another policy for that. So here you're talking about events that will take place in Dieppe and would be activities that only would take place in Dieppe. Yes, often there would be an association that would welcome a provincial congress and would ask for sponsorship. Next year could be another place, but most of the requests would be in that order. Mrs. Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. When I read the policy as such, you speak of a request that is not framed by a policy, or if the financing amount is too high, then it wouldn't be evaluated. In the procedure, would it be sent again to the organization if the request is not complete, so the amount can be reevaluated? Yes, thank you. Other questions? Councillor Godet. In the case of groups that will present one event, it could be a cultural group or a theater, a choir. In which category would that fall? That could be sponsorship in most cases. And I've been told that there is no policy that would frame this type of event. Some people have asked for it the past few years, but we're not eligible. Would you consider their request? Yes, if they would be in the municipality and they would give a presence in the municipality, yes. Often when we refuse them in the majority, it's because they don't offer a presence within the city, so it doesn't go within the definition of the policy. But if there is some presence there within the city and the other criteria are respected, yes, they would be eligible. In many cases, it would be a cultural activity that we wouldn't have here otherwise. Maybe it would come once every 2 or 3 years. And they don't have the ability or the knowledge. Well, perhaps they could be eligible under the events policy, the events that would take place here. Here, we're just talking about sponsorships, but we have many other policies as well for other events. Thank you. Mr. Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to ask if a person or an organization that would make a request for sponsorship but does not meet the criteria of this program would be advised that there are other policies that could allow them to obtain financing or a sponsorship under another program. So the staff that will receive this request, will they be able to direct the person in the right direction? Yes, we already have that practice internally, even though we don't have a policy. If I receive a request that would sit better under another policy, I would send them, for instance, to the sporting division. But I won't eliminate a person just because he didn't knock on the right door. So it's not necessarily requests that were received during the budget deliberations. It could be received during the year. Yes, we ask that we receive them 30 days before the event is planned, or 60 days if it's an amount that's over $500. But these requests, will they all be sent to the council, or the requests that have been granted? We'll give you a quarterly report so that you'll know what the amounts are and which requests were accepted. Will we also receive those that were evaluated but did not meet the criteria? We can end them. Thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you for your presentation. Mrs. Cormier will come now for the second part. Good evening, Your Worship. You can ask questions if you want. We've got a new policy for donations. The list that we gave you in January. We're trying to frame all the policies and all the requests. So if you have any questions, Mrs. Dallaire. I see in the policy that you propose that requests should be submitted before August 30th of the previous year, but the people that know every year that they will send a request, it's obvious, but what about the people or the organizations that only do it once? Perhaps they might not have that much time to be able to do it. We will still evaluate them, but if it's positive or negatively, in the letter, we always indicate that for the next year they will do it before August 31st. Perhaps it could be stipulated more clearly. If I were a community organization and I would read that, I wouldn't even bother having another request the next year because of this date. Thank you. That will be noted. Any other questions from councillors? That's it. Thank you. It wasn't too difficult. Good. The next item is the revision of the partnership policy. So the policy on the associations sector is a policy of 2012. We want to revise it. Between 2002, we have made modifications. So the policy L13, we've made changes to L16. The policy I want to talk about are the objectives and the new categories. And then I will take questions and comments. We want more technical support with our associations and partnerships because we want to include requests for events, courses within the policy. We did not have many until about 2 years ago for walks or within the city. So people have asked to close streets, so we've had street closures, and as for the security of our residents as well. So we want to add that to the policies. With the new categories in the policies that were there before were sponsorships, and now we talk about financing, definition of terms, eligibility, and the particulars to follow for the support of the city, and we have no financial contribution in this policy. It's basically partnerships with our groups. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments, but I can give you an example. Our events, the bike tour, we have that event. We have partnerships, but we have support from the staff, and we provide equipment too. And for runs within the streets as well, we used to work with Public Works, but now we work with everybody, the police, and we try to work with all these runs that happen in the Ville, in the city, and the street closures. Any questions from the members of council? Councillor Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the request for civil insurance, sometimes we ask for 5 million, sometimes 2 million. I think it should be consistent with the other policies. Yes, we've spoken about that to our insurers, and they said that 2 million is sufficient for the runs because they're usually Sunday morning. So there's no real risks for huge accidents. So we follow that policy. Well, we have been following for the past 2 years, and it's going very well with the insurance companies as well. All the organizations respect that policy. Thank you. Councillor Béliveau. Did I understand well that this policy does not include financing? Yes. So on page 51, services offered by the municipality says that a maximum of $250 of publicity is bought. Is that the city that buys that? What section is that? For collaborators. It's on our page 51. It's a page 2 of 6 pages. That's our former policy which we want to abolish and replace with a new policy. Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation of this new policy that will be presented to us before council and reading, etc. Thank you. Next item, we're talking here about participatory budget. Mr. Richard and invitees. Invitee? Invited guest? Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, colleagues, residents. This presentation is to present to you the recommendations received from the steering committee on the participatory budget. We want to start on May 11th with a formal recommendation for resolution and adoption by the council. So as it was president last Monday, the members of the steering committee have met recently to deliberate with a consultant on the PBP, the participatory budget. We still have a few details to finalize, but we will give you the general tonight. And I shall invite in a few minutes our two spokespeople for the group. To begin with, to put things into context, we have 4 groups acting in this budget with a distinct role. Firstly, the municipal council has a role of adopting the principal elements for this budget. The advisory committee is composed of employees and consultants with a role to coordinate the logistics and to include volunteers as well during this process. The third group is the steering committee composed of 14 residents and 3 councillors who are non-resident with a role to make recommendations to the municipal council and to ensure that the process is guided with respecting the parameters. We have work committees as well composed of many residents who will contribute to the process with the role of taking ideas and to build projects, to put the meat on the bone, as you will. So to present these projects to the public, we wish to do that in the fall. So these are our 4 groups of actors. No questions, so I guess everybody understands. We've repeated it, this message recently, but I'm going to present 2 spokespeople, Madame Duguay and Mr. Bélanger. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. Good evening, Mrs. Duguay and Mr. Bélanger. Welcome back. Before beginning with the recommendations of the committee, I wanted to underline the objective of this process. It was discussed and we found it interesting. We have 3 objectives. I think you will agree. The first one is an educational and inclusive process, and we will ask for the commitment of the community the members to give more of a sense of belonging in Dieppe. It'll be a good model for transparency in government, and those are our objectives. It's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions? So I shall give the podium to Mr. Bélanger. The process of the budget and a vote, which we would like to have in November. So the first step is the ideas. We would like to start in May until August with a different means to meet people and ask them what they would do with a certain amount of money for the community. We want them to be creative and innovative, and now we want to commit them in this. All the ideas are good, and citizens can present them to public meetings for this budget. We're going to go on the web. We'll go personally, face-to-face, meet people, and do a lot of publicity. We'll give you more details later. We're working on that now. The next step, June to October, we're going to put everything into place. The projects will be put in place by the citizens, and according to the vote, there'll be choices. We'll have weekly meetings over 8 weeks to develop this process, and we have a team. And the third step in November will be putting the projects into place, proceed to the vote within the community, and people will vote for the projects they want to put into place. Are there any questions about the process? So we're looking at November.
Just to check out, maybe I don't understand. The idea is it would be from May to August, and you said that it would be from June, October that it would be set up? For the time being, it's the preliminary draft, so with the ideas, we could still have the training of the delegates and the artisans of the budget, and that could start already starting June, the recruitment, and then we'd have to decide, will things continue during the summer or will it go to fall? So that still has to be determined. Actually, the steering committee is meeting next week, so. Thank you. Actually, it's already starting in June. We'll have to start looking for these people already. So now we're talking about eligibility. So the steering committee wants the budget to be as inclusive as possible. One of its objectives is to encourage civil participation by residents. So the steering committee recommends that whoever lives in Dieppe and who is either from, it goes even lower than 12 years of age, anybody 12 years and older will be able to participate in all steps. So in the participatory budget, there are 3 steps. There's the ideas. Then the steering committee basically was recommend you that anybody can give you eddies, no age restriction, no geographical restriction. And the benefits of that is that if there's a business person who wants to invest, maybe he's not a resident at Dieppe, but he might have a good idea. So why couldn't he submit an idea? The next step would be the budgetary delegate. This is where we would develop and we would prepare the ideas. The steering committee was, how would you say, pretty audacious. We went so far as, Boston, they went to 12 years old. So what we're recommending or suggesting is that even a child could develop an idea, just as long as the child is accompanied by somebody who'd be at least 14 years old. So the objective is to make it, the idea is to start as young as possible. And there were a lot of moms in the group, and they said, okay, well, they could get involved. Okay, if they're accompanied by an adult and the parent is okay with it, why not? It's an idea. And then finally, there's the step of the vote. So at this point, it would be the Dieppe residents who would vote for the project. So you see, it starts very broad to get as many ideas as possible. And then when we get to the vote, it's basically the stakeholders or the residents of Dieppe. So yeah, we're not saying 12 years old. Actually, we're saying from the 6th grade. So starting in 6th grade, if you're a resident of Dieppe, then you could vote. Yes. There are questions, comments. Are there? Councillor Dallaire, how are we going to manage the vote process to make sure of the addresses of the people? I don't want to complicate things, but I just want to understand how is it set up. Yeah, it's a good question. Technicality. That's why we have our consultants. So they set up mechanisms in different towns. Identification paper, just to show, to make sure that the people who are voting are really residents. I mean, any other question? So things seem to be moving along very well. Eligible projects, as we said before, we don't want to put any barriers. So the committee, there should be capital projects and programs and services from the programs of the capital. We don't want any constraints on the project. This is what we hope. We could, on the other hand, establish certain parameters, and they could be decided by next meeting. As an example, and once again, it's just an example, depending on the amount that would be awarded, there should be a cap. For example, in $50,000 for capital in programs, $10,000. We want to promote community projects that will involve people in the neighborhood, but all the while using infrastructure that's there already. So just as long as people have ideas, they're creative, they have projects, and then we will give them the opportunity to develop those programs. And so very often it's a question of funds. We didn't want, on the other hand, to impose any restrictions. Were there any questions? Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. Why am I the only one asking questions? My colleagues should also ask questions. In your way of seeing things, for services, do you see these as punctual year's services, or would it be something that would be on a yearly basis every year, and something that it would be basically something that would be added to the services that the municipality already has? Basically, what we'd like to have would be basically sustainable services. You don't want to create something once and then in a year it's gone. But at the same time, when we talk about projects, it's very difficult for me to say, okay, it's not going to be this, it's not going to be that. The idea is that we want basically projects that are sustainable. This is where the budget delegate, the role of the budget delegate is very important, because that person is going to be the person who's going to go meet the people in Dieppe to collect the information, to find out about the feasibility, to find out what's being done elsewhere. And this is where there's a lot of work, and where concrete things would come up. Once plan a project on a paper is one thing, but once it's the step of the budget delegate that things start to get built. Maybe you mentioned it already, but is there a certain amount of percentage that would be set aside for infrastructure, or is that open? We're trying for the first time to leave as much freedom as possible. We don't want to inhibit creativity with the people. If we say, okay, you have 200,000 in capital and 50,000 in services, we don't want people to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do it because it's not going to work. It's just 50,000 for my project, etc. What we want to do is say, okay, no, there's it. I mean, if there's a budget of 300,000 for capital, then that's what it would be. Right now, we're looking for ideas. So at this point, it's a little bit difficult to say what it would be. But what we know it won't be is that we can tell you we want both, but it would depend on the ideas that would come up. Obviously, if it gets down to a vote and the majority of the people vote for some services, it would be a sign that there are certain needs that wouldn't have been answered in the community. It's not something that I would have thought of, but I think it's a good approach. Thank you. Any other questions? So we go on. Dominique, my colleague, has already given some figures. So if you've followed what he was saying, basically what we recommend you is to invest $300,000 for the participatory budget. And this is a little bit what goes on at Saint-Basile-le-Grand, which is the only other community in Canada that does this. And that's $200,000 for a certain amount of population. So what we wanted to do is to stand out and say, okay, we're going to go for $300,000 and put Dieppe on the map. We have to think also that Saint-Basile-le-Grand there's a part of Saint-Basile-le-Blanc that's rural. There's also a part that's urban, but it's mostly rural. Any reactions concerning the amount? There's no green light. No, but it's not red. Obviously, we appreciate the recommendation. I know that when we had the first discussions, it seemed that we had talked about 200, 250,000. I think those were the figures that have been mentioned last year when we talked about it. So things have to be taken into consideration. The budget, the recommendations that will be brought to us, the winning proposal or the winning proposals. Obviously, before launching this, the council will have to agree on a predetermined amount, and it'll be a question of having the people deliver the merchandise, basically, without wanting to predict the result of the conversations of council. I think that we're within parameters, so we've got an enclosed field to work with. It's not an open field. So, Councillor Godet. The infield as opposed to the outfield, but in the outfield we're still in the ballpark. But I think we can go past the infield. For me, 300,000 is certainly a minimum. I would have thought more in the line of 1%. And I think for it to be something that's going to be valid and that relates to what we can do, I think it could be maybe 1% of our budget, and it even should be more. So that certainly will be my position. I think that popular wisdom needs to be heeded, and we have to put things in practice. Thank you. Are there any more comments? I have always played in the outfield, and I always felt part of the team. Well, just as long as you caught all the flies. $300,000, as far as I'm concerned, is okay. It's something that continues, so this can be reassessed on an annual basis, depending on the proposals that we will be receiving. So I think it's a nice start, and if we could see the value of the process increase with the projects, then we'll have to see those as they come. Thank you, Councillor Blanc. Someone else? Mr. Thibodeau. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the amount, I'm not very comfortable with 300,000 for a first experience. Eventually, later, maybe, yes, but I think that for a first experience, maybe we should be a little bit more modest. And then if we see that the experience is worthwhile and things are working properly, then at that point we could maybe put in an increase to 1%. $0.01 of taxes represents $280 represents approximately 1 cent in Dieppe. 1% would be basically way above this. That would be a 1.5 cents. That's approximately what the rates are. Things should be put in context. So thank you for your presentation. We basically continue to appreciate the work that's done by the volunteers, the organization, all the steps, starting with the organizing committee at the start. Many people got involved. And I know that municipal council believes in this a whole lot. At least since the election of this council, 2012, we've talked about community involvement, engagement to bring people in. Examples of this over the last 3 years, and it's the intention of the council. And I think I talk on behalf of the council to want to continue to to work in that way of democratizing the municipal hall. I mean, we're talking about also the inline live presentations of the municipal council meetings on a monthly basis. So thank you very much, and we continue. Maybe to finish off, I'd like to mention the presence of two of our colleagues, this is, including one youth from Mathieu Martin. That goes to show you the engagement on a Monday night at 6 o'clock. This is, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most interesting committees that I've sat on in a long time. Enriching, enjoyable, etc. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Alors, maintenant, pour...
So now, for committee reports, I think there's just one tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I could give you a couple of updates. So if I may, Your Worship. So first of all, the first one I have is the the report of the Madame Dalaire's report that I have. Report to the Standing Committee on Strategy and Public Policies. Good. I have 5.4.1, which is the next item. Maybe you have a different agenda, but no matter. Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to give a report on behalf of the Francophonie Advisory Committee of the City of Dieppe to give a brief outline of the work that's been done over the last year and to present a recommendation that a recommendation to council before staff can start work. I wanted to introduce the members of the committee. In the presentation that you've received, there are some changes to the members of council of the committee. We have two members of committee for different reasons who have decided to not reoffer. Madame Larsenault, who's the youth representative that does not reoffer. So we will have to find someone to replace her. And there is Serge Bidot, who is the representative of the community who is not reoffering. And that position was filled by Melissa Daigle. The other members of the committee, we have Luc Béliveau, representative of schools, France Casey, representative of the community, Isabelle Miki Alain, who's a representative of the community, Yvan Roy, who's a representative of post-secondary institution, Philippe Thériault, representative of Champlain Place. And we have to fill the vacant position of Dieppe businesses. I've tried, but I haven't been able to fill that position yet. And over the last year, it's actually been quite a while that we've been getting presentations to inform us because we wanted to set up a work plan, a long-term work plan, to work on our action plan. We had many presentations from the Department of Education with for culture and the French language, Francophone Sud, South also, who came to talk to us about work on building identity. We have initiatives in the municipality also that touch on the work of the committee. For example, the policy of the heritage, the cultural policy of the city of Dieppe. And once we're closer to finalizing or an action plan, we'll be happy on behalf of the committee to present the different aspects on which we'll be working. One of the things that we spent much time on was to get to know what was going on within our accredited organizations and what kind of place the French language has within those organizations in the structure and also with the community. When there are documents, are they bilingual? There are many questions that we had, and we don't have a clear snapshot of what's going on in the community. So we'll need more data to be able to establish an action plan as to how we want to work with our recommendations at municipal council. So the possible theme for this would be communication with members, how they communicate by email, by websites, for meetings and things. Is it in both languages or in English or in French? And how much resources from their budget do they affect on the language during their meetings, the board meetings, the AGMs between parents, teams? Also, we thought we could create some synergy between the organizations, because I know there are some practices that other organizations can benefit from. So what are basically the exemplary practices, and we can share them with the organizations. Also, the constitutions, the regulations, is all these things taking place in both languages. And when they offer training for their volunteers, in what language is it done? Officials, referees. So we'd like to be able to have a list of all that type of information. And I know that there's a community survey that is being set up within the municipality. So if council would agree, it maybe would be possible to incorporate some of our questions in the survey. Thank you. If there are any questions on the report as such. Thank you for the work. And I'm convinced that Mr. Burke will have noted the survey and how the survey can incorporate some of those questions. Thank you. Going back to the agenda, the Dieppe Advisory Committee on Accessibility. Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a long time coming because there were challenges. It's public transport, and it's a study that we asked a professor from Mount Allison. He did give us an idea that the project was moving forward, and it's something that he was doing with some of his students, researchers. So these are students, so they can't work on the project full-time. I think we should have a summary of the activities next month. So at that point, we'll have data that will be useful to show the use of accessible public transport for the population. We will get information with this. So this is the big piece of work that we're working on. Unfortunately, we didn't have as many meetings as we would have wanted to, but pending the report from the Mount Allison professor. So that's about it, Mr. Mayor. Now, on the Advisory Committee on Equal Opportunity between Men and Women, women and men, I don't think anything has been submitted. On the Environment Advisory Committee, our colleague is not here, but I think I am in a position to be able to talk on behalf of the committee because I was present, which was the first meeting before June, since June last year. It's a committee that for which we had a lot of difficulty in finding venues for the meeting, but hopefully things will be improving over the next couple of months. Having said this, we had a meeting on the 26th of March, and we discussed different items on the agenda, specifically the one that had been presented to us on climate change by the students. Madame Chevalier presented the Horizon program on which the committee will be thinking in order to bring forth a recommendation to municipal council. And the other program that we discussed was the tree planting with our employee Justin Poirier. Who gave us an overview of the program and identification of different things, activities with trees which are recommended for planting considering climate change. Our next meeting was scheduled for last Thursday, but if you remember, it was our volunteer recognition evening, so that meeting was canceled. And we're looking for a date as soon as possible with a quorum, because that's been a problem with that committee. But among other things, we encourage them to participate in the conferences that are going to take place, I think, tomorrow, Wednesday, on climate change. As a matter of fact, I think all members of council have received a notification on this. Tomorrow's presentation is at Anna Malenfant School. And Wednesdays would be we're getting Mr. Richard to work on internet at the other end of the room to make sure that we have the proper information to give you. Tuesday at the Carrefour, and Anna Malenfant will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. in both cases. And essentially what will be presented, members of council have seen this, it will be presented to the public now, is the impact of climate change on the municipality. So it's a subject that is certainly going to give us much work over the next couple of years, decisions and things like that. So that's basically the item, very preliminary item on the Environment Advisory Committee. That's for tonight. So basically, unless there's anything else, any questions from members of council, this would put an end to presentations for tonight, and we'll wish everybody a good evening. Good night.